This morning we're going to be in Revelation chapter 1, verses 1 through 3. The revelation of Jesus Christ that God gave him to show his servants what must soon take place. He made it known by sending his angel to his servant John, who testified to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, whatever he saw. Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear the words of this prophecy and keep what is written in it, because the time is near. This is the word of the Lord for us today. You can be seated.
Olivia. Wow. How did you say it? The primary need, the ultimate need we have this morning for our souls is to hear truth from the Word of God. No pressure. Thank you, Olivia. Just having some fun. All right. Well, as everybody knows, how are we doing? As everybody knows, John's on sabbatical this summer. We're coming down kind of to the end. There's a few more weeks. So you got a few more weeks of us filling in until John is back. So we're good there. But he'll be back sooner than we realize. Before we get started, or as we get started, I want to try something this morning. I want to do a little word association. All right? So I'm going to say a word. And I want you to, the first thing that comes to your mind, okay, don't think about it too hard. That's the whole word association, is you say something, and just the first thing you envision or see is I want you to clamp on that, and I want to hear what it is. Okay, so we'll start light. The first word, ready? Calypso. Music, did I hear Caribbean? What's that? I'm sorry, what's that? A ride. Oh, is it a ride? Oh, okay. All right. That was an answer I wasn't anticipating. All right. Yeah. So most everybody, I think I heard Revelation down here. We'll get to that. And I sort of fed that with our scripture reading. But yeah, calypso, beat music, summer, maybe steel drums or the drinks with the umbrella, the whole bit. All right. Yeah. All right. Now let's get a little more serious or a little heavier. Apocalypse. And, all right, what movie came to mind? Yeah. Is that? Right, yeah. So we get the visions of, yeah, all right. I can't talk with just one hand. So, of course, and everybody cheers. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, okay, so we got the end. You get visions of the collapse, a worldwide collapse, some kind of calamity, a complete collapse of society. And in fact, that whole apocalyptic idea, especially post-apocalyptic, after the apocalypse, now is its own genre in literature. Especially, I think this probably started as far as I could tell, not that I've studied it that much, but historians could tell us, really came about in the 1960s and the 70s and that. The first one that I can think of is like the Planet of the Apes, a post-apocalyptic world. You've got genres of movies and books and TV shows and video games. You've got things like, I think one of the more newer ones, The Last of Us, started out as a video game and then became a Netflix thing. You've got Omega Man and Waterworld and Walking Dead, and there's I don't know how many Mad Max iterations there have been over the decades. All of these things taking place in a post-apocalyptic world where there's been complete devastation, collapse of society. I remember going to see, this has been a long time ago, I went to see a movie, 12 Monkeys. And it's a post-apocalyptic one as well. I really, to be honest, I don't remember it well enough to even recommend it. But I remember going with a group of friends and coming out of this movie, and they're talking about this, and how amazing this was, and the symbolism and all that. I was completely lost. I was like, what the heck was that? But it was just this post-apocalyptic weirdness. Anyway, well, we'll come back to that. As I said, John's on sabbatical. We got a few more weeks of us filling in, and then John will be back. That's the good news. John will be back. The bad news is by the time John gets back, the summer's almost over, so take that for what it is. But all summer, we've had a loose theme. It hasn't been hammered real heavy, but there's been this loose theme throughout the summer about the mission of God. Or us telling our stories, evangelism, missions, just what is God doing and how are we a part of that? And that's even filled in with in the back we've had the ping pong balls, the bless. You remember we've been talking about blessing our community. So if you remember, we started back in Isaiah 6, all the way back at the beginning of the summer. We started in Isaiah 6. So we spent a few weeks there and we looked at how God calls his people and how God sends his people. So we have a calling God, a sending God, an active God who is calling his people and sending them into the world. We spent a couple of weeks in 2 Corinthians. So we looked at aspects of the glory of God, but then we also talked about what does it mean that we're in a new covenant and that we're ministers of a new covenant. Again, this aspect of we're all ministers and we have this ministry of a new covenant. We spent a week in the book of Acts and we looked at the Apostle Paul and he was standing in front of, who's he standing in front of? It was Festus, wasn't it? Well, he's standing in front of somebody, and he's defending himself, and he's telling his story. And in the process of telling his life story, he's telling the story of God and Jesus as well. And so we saw how we can use our stories and our lives to tell the story of God as well. And of course, we've been talking about the bless all summer, of being with people, of listening to people, of eating or having coffee or spending time with people, serving them and meeting their tangible needs, but then also sharing the story, our story, and the story of Christ. So, what does all this have to do with apocalypse and Revelation? Well, I want to do it. I'm kind of looking forward to this. We'll see what you think in 3 weeks, but I've been looking forward to this. I want to spend 3 weeks in Revelation, and I'm calling it the apocalypse and the mission of God. And I picked apocalypse because that just sounds so much more intense than Revelation and the mission of God. It's the apocalypse and the mission of God. And what does that have to do with our lives today? So today we want to camp on Revelation a little bit in the first 3 verses, and basically we're going to look at what kind of literature is Revelation? How do we read Revelation? How do we approach Revelation? How does Revelation fit into the story of God? And what difference can it make for us today, for tomorrow? Next week, we want to look at, in a sense, the whole book and some of the themes that come out in the book. You've got beasts and you've got riders on horses and you got plagues and you got all sorts of nasty things going on. We're going to look at some of the major themes of the book of Revelation and really how it fits into this emphasis of blessing as well. And then the third week, we're going to look at the end. The last 2 chapters. How does it end? How do things end? How does the world end? Or does it? We'll see. Anyway, that's where we're going. Now, when we look at the book of Revelation, there's 2 extremes that I think we need to avoid whenever we're looking at the book of Revelation. And the first is the tendency to spend too much time in the book of Revelation. I don't know, maybe you're one of these people, maybe you know one of these people, that their tendency, their daily practice is to sit with the book of Revelation open in one hand and the New York Times in the other hand. Or they're looking at the book of Revelation in one hand and Fox News on the TV in the proverbial other hand. And they're trying to figure out, okay, are these locusts? Or is this what seal or bowl? And in a sense, they try to decipher every little element and how it's fitting into the contemporary events or the people. And quite frankly, just spending a little bit too much time analyzing, hey, wait a minute, the European Union symbol is a woman sitting on a bowl. That looks an awful lot like a harlot on a beast to me. The other extreme, though, is to kind of scoff at that and then spend no little time in Revelation. You just kind of ignore it. Okay, I read the book, I saw the movie, I know how it ends. Let's just wait and see what happens, because it's really, quite frankly, all too weird. To just, what do we do with this book? So I want to sit somewhere in the middle of that tension. and first talk about what is the book of Revelation. Now, if you ask somebody what the book of Revelation is, probably most of us would think that the book of Revelation, or we would say that it's a prophecy. It's a prophecy about the end of the world. Here's how things are going to end. Here's what's going to happen. It's prophetic, and these are events that are going to happen sometime in the future. That's true in part, to a certain degree. I believe that's true in the sense that it's prophetic, and it is describing things that will likely happen. But more significantly than that is the fact that the book of Revelation is what we call apocalyptic literature. And that's where apocalyptic and Revelation kind of merge together. In fact, in other languages, I know whenever I speak in the Dominican Republic and I'm being translated into Spanish, if you ever say Revelation, it's always apocalypsis. That's the name of the book in Spanish. Apocalyptic literature, unlike what we think of as a genre of movies and books and video games that's all about the end and cataclysmic events and all that, there is that, but more than that being the emphasis, apocalyptic literature was a very precise Jewish genre. If you think of historic Jewish genres, especially around the time and before the time of Christ, a Jewish genre of literature was called apocalyptic literature. And what it did was it revealed truth. Now, it revealed truth in a prophetic way, but it also revealed truth even in a present tense way. We're revealing something that's going on, but it did so in a very specific manner, and that's where you get all the beasts and the visions and the symbolism. So apocalyptic literature revealed truth using symbols and metaphors and illustrations like that. And it comes from two words, calypso. Now, I said calypso, and everybody thought music. Did anybody think Greek mythology? There we go. Yeah, we got some scholar hands in the back. Yeah. Calypso was a Greek nymph. Now, I'm not enough of a nerd on Greek mythology to know what the difference is between a nymph and a goddess and a god. Well, I know the difference between god and goddess. But nymphs and all that, I don't know where she fits in the hierarchy of things. But Calypso was a nymph. And if you read Greek mythology, one of the things that she did is when Odysseus went on his trip, somehow she got a hold of him and she kept him captive for 2 years and she kept him away from everybody else. And so she got the name Calypso because Calypso comes from a Greek word, kalupso, K-A-L-U-P-S-O, calypso, that means to hide, to conceal, to cover. So Calypso, the Greek nymph, the Greek goddess Calypso, became known as the one who conceals, who hides, who covers. Apo is a Greek word, A-P-O, that just means away from or the opposite of. So, apocalypso is to away from hiding, away from revealing, away from concealing. It's the opposite of. So literally, apocalypse means to reveal. So when we're thinking about Jewish history, when we're thinking about Jewish literature, when we're thinking about early Christian literature like the book of Revelation, don't think end of world, collapse, calamity, that kind of stuff as much in apocalypse as we do visions and metaphors and ideas that are revealing something about what God is doing and will do, but what he's doing now as well. That makes sense? And it's so full of visions, and it's so full of metaphors and symbols. And quite frankly, we're so removed from it that in time, that sometimes it can become a little difficult to think, just what's going on here? So for example, if I showed you a cartoon or I started talking about political cartoons and I showed you something that had a donkey or an elephant, we'd all know exactly what that means. The elephant is the Republicans, the donkeys are the Democrats. We're familiar with that. If I showed you a British cartoon that had a rooster, what would be the subject of that? Yeah, see, that's the difference in culture and time. Oh, by the way, that'd be France. I don't know why, but the French are roosters. Okay, so let's actually look in the book, all right? our text this morning was the first three verses of Revelation. So let's actually dive into the book itself. Revelation 1 through 3. The revelation of Jesus Christ, that God gave him to show his servants what must soon take place. He made it known by sending his angel to his servant John, who testified to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, whatever he saw. Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear the words of this prophecy, and also keep what is written in it, because the time is near. All right. The revelation of Jesus Christ. Okay, first off, if you don't take anything away from this morning other than this, it's the revelation of Jesus Christ. It's singular. It's not the revelations of Jesus Christ, all right? Pet peeve of mine, but just it's singular. I thought that would get more reaction. Oh, anyway. The revelation of Jesus Christ. And it's the revelation of Jesus Christ. Sometimes it's referred to as the revelation of John, or technically it's the revelation of Jesus Christ. Now the Greek there, the revelation of Jesus Christ, like the English, allows us to interpret this or think of this in two different ways. One is as the source. It comes from. This is the revelation of Jesus Christ. In fact, the NIV, if you have the NIV, it actually translates it, the revelation from Jesus Christ. All the other major translations, probably everybody else in the room who doesn't have an NIV, it says the revelation of Jesus Christ, which can mean source. It comes from Jesus Christ. But it can also mean, of Jesus Christ, can also mean it's about Jesus Christ. So it could be the revelation from Jesus Christ, or it could be a revelation about Jesus Christ. The Greek can go either way. The English can go either way. And I think that's on purpose, because both the Greek and the English could have written it more precisely. It could have been the revelation about Jesus Christ that God gave him. Or it could have been written the revelation from Jesus Christ. But it's written of, because it's a book that's both from Jesus Christ and it's a book that it's about Jesus Christ. And we see that in the rest of that verse, in verse 2. The revelation of Jesus Christ that God gave him to show, and him there I think is Jesus, that God gave the revelation to him, Jesus, to show his servants, John, and then everybody else that came after him, what must soon take place. And he, Jesus, made it known by sending an angel to his servant John. So we see the process here of God giving the revelation to Jesus and Jesus making it known to John and his servants after that by giving an angel to guide through this. And then John, in turn, testifies, he says, he tells, he witnesses what he saw. The book ends with a command to John in chapter 22. The book ends with a command to John, do not seal up these words. And if you think about it, when it was originally written, it would have been written on a scroll. So it's written, everything's written on a scroll. And then when John's done, he'd roll up the scroll. And if you roll up a scroll and you put a seal on it, then it can't be opened. And in fact, there are some prophecies and some apocalyptic literature in the Old Testament where the writer is told, seal this up. And in a sense, this isn't going to happen yet. Seal it up. But here, John is told, don't seal it. Become a testimony, a witness. And so the book begins and the book ends with this command to make known, to tell these things. All right? Now, this creates two immediate problems. We're only into a verse and a half, and we've got at least two problems that I can see already. One is verse 3. Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear the words of this prophecy and keep what is written. How is the book of Revelation a blessing? And if Revelation is primarily prophecy, if it's things that are just going to happen, I shouldn't say just, but if it's things that are going to happen in the future, if this is what God is going to do in the future, how do we keep it? How do you obey it? How do you obey a prophecy? Isaiah writes, a virgin will give birth to a son, and he'll be named Emmanuel. Great. Well, the only one that can obey that prophecy are Mary and Joseph, who named their son Jesus, Emmanuel. For the rest of us, we can believe it, but how do you keep it? So how does revelation become something that is a blessing? How many people would consider revelation actually a blessing? And how do you obey prophecy or revelation? That's the first problem. The second problem, verse 1, the revelation of Jesus Christ that God gave him to show his servants what must soon take place. Verse 3, because the time is near. Must soon take place because the time is near. Really? It's been 2,000 years. Must soon take place? When the original writers heard this, what did they think? Did they expect something to happen soon? Were they expecting, oh, well, this is really good news, but, not for us? What did a believer in Ireland in the 900s think about the book of Revelation? And how is it a blessing, but also how do we wrestle with that must soon take place? Because the time is near. Well, there's three ways this has been addressed. And it has to be addressed because history is littered with people that have made false predictions and have tried to fit Revelation too much into the current time or tried to be too specific with the events. I think my favorite one is in 1988. I forget the guy's name. In 1988, you remember the pamphlet? What was the name of it? Do you remember it? No. The guy wrote a pamphlet in 1988. I probably wrote it in 1987. Because it was 88 reasons Jesus is coming back in 1998. Oh, no, I'm sorry, 1988. So he writes this pamphlet, 88 reasons Jesus is coming back in 1988. And it sold, it was a little thing. It wasn't a big book. It was a little pamphlet. But it sold and was given out by the millions. I mean, it was amazingly popular. And of course, in 1988, nothing happened. Well, all sorts of things happened in 1988, but Jesus didn't return. So, I kid you not, he wrote another one. 89 reasons why Jesus is coming back in 1989. It didn't sell as well. For 2,000 years, we've been singing hymns and talking about Jesus coming back soon. And in the more fringe areas, predictions are being made and interpretations are being done. And at some point, it kind of might become a credibility issue where people out there have said, yeah, I've heard this before. So how do we deal with Revelation? And let's deal with the second problem first. How do we deal with it must soon take place or the time is near? There's three ways this has been addressed. One is that the time is near, and more particularly, must soon take place, doesn't mean that it's going to take place like right away. It means that when it starts happening, it's going to happen fast. It's going to take place quickly. Now, the original Greek allows for that, but it's a pretty obscure meaning, and it's not what most translate. I don't think I've ever seen a translation that would say, because it's going to happen quickly. This is the more normal way to think of it is that it's going to happen soon. But one answer to that is to say, well, it doesn't mean it's going to happen like right away, but when these events start, it's going to happen fast. And that's, most of the books, most of the movies and all that, that's what happens. Once things get started, it's literally all hell breaks loose for usually 7 years. All right? And that's one way of addressing it. Another way to address it is that soon is relative. We all know, Peter said, for God, a day is like 1,000 years, or 1,000 years is like a day. I forget which way that goes. But the point is that from God's perspective, you could say, well, he only wrote this 2 days ago. So, what's the rush? Because God is outside of time. Quite frankly, I don't like either of those answers. I don't like the first answer because if I said to you, I'm going to buy a car soon. Well, I guess I should say, my wife and I are going to buy a car soon, because I'd never buy a car without my wife being involved. I'm always amazed, it's kind of an aside, I'm always amazed every Christmas, there's always these advertisements. So this husband that goes out and buys like matching cars for him and his wife. No. Okay, that doesn't have anything to do with Revelation. But if I said, you know what, we're going to buy a new car soon. You'd think, all right, within the next couple of days, maybe the week, by the end of the year, we're buying a new car. What you're not thinking is that 8 years from now, we're going to go out and in one day pick out and pay for and buy the car and take it home. It's not the natural sense of how it's worded. So I don't think it's going to happen quickly, but at some distant time. I don't buy that. And I'm not comfortable with the whole, well, time is different for God than it is for us. I mean, that's true. There's no doubt about that. But if he writes a revelation, a revealing, and he says these things are going to happen soon, and he's telling John, witness it, be a witness, because it's going to happen soon. And if he tells us that the people who read and hear and do these things will be blessed, because this is going to happen soon, but he's talking about really 2,000 years later, I don't want to say it's deceptive, but it's not the natural way that any of us would hear that or read it if we heard it. So, what do we do with these two problems? Particularly the one about coming soon, or these things happening soon. I would say that most of us, and this was true of me, are conditioned, especially within American evangelicalism, we're conditioned to read the book of Revelation as strictly prophecy about things that are going to happen sometime in the future, and depending on how tightly you want to interpret it, or literally how specific these events correlate, or the things that John sees and writes about, how specifically they correlate to actual events and people. That's the assumption behind things like the Left Behind series that was so wildly popular in the books and the movies. I think it's pretty much the assumption of every book that's been written about Israel and the Middle East since the 1940s, certainly 1948, is that it's all prophecy and very future and specific. That everything from pretty much chapter 4 to chapter 20 takes place in a very short period of time in the future. Now, most of church history, and quite frankly, most believers outside of 20th century American evangelicals, this is not how they read Revelation or how it's been read. There have always been the interpretation of Revelation as being primarily future. But more than that, Revelation isn't so much specifically and limited to future events as it is what's happening now. What is God doing now? And in some way or another, this is going on now. It happens now. Will there be future fulfillment in a more specific way? Yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm open to that. But when Jesus says soon and the time is near, I believe that those things started soon after John wrote that. And the Revelation isn't so much a prophecy about specific future events, although maybe it'll pan out that way. But the point of apocalyptic Jewish literature isn't so much specific future events as revealing what God is doing now. And particularly how his church, how he wants his servants to be blessed by it and to keep it. The things described in Revelation, I believe, are happening now and have been since it's written. That's how I think we answer because the time is near. It's because it was. Now, that time has been 2,000 years, but the start of it was near. Soon take place. And it was. It did. It has been. Okay. So, and that kind of feeds in also to how we're blessed. How are we blessed by Revelation? How do we keep Revelation? How are readers of Revelation, hearers of Revelation, doers of Revelation, how are we blessed? We're blessed because apocalyptic literature in general, and the book of Revelation in specific, gives us hope. We'll look at this more next week. We'll really dive into the whole book, and we'll look at what does Revelation want us to do? What does Revelation want us to keep? And how does that bring hope? But that's the first way we're blessed by reading and studying Revelation is it gives us hope. We see God in control. We see God at work in the world. We see evil at work in the world in the book as well, but we see God addressing it and an end to suffering and an end to evil and an end to judgment. We see our world in the book of Revelation and all the crap that goes on in it, but then we also see God at work in the midst of it, and it brings us hope. And it brings hope. You think about, how did the original readers read this? And in the context of believers in the Roman Empire who were often a minority that were oppressed, it gave them hope. It gives the church in the midst of oppression and persecution hope and a cause for resistance. And for those who are weary of evil, it gives hope for God addressing that evil and resisting against it. Reading apocalyptic literature, reading Revelation in the present tense helps, as an apocalypse in the present tense, gives us hope. It also gives us a challenge, because when believers enjoy privilege, when believers are part of the dominant culture, the tendency, the temptation can be conformity. And Revelation, as we'll see, particularly next week when we really dive into the content of it, we'll see how it's also a challenge to conformity in the present tense. Revelation was written to believers who were a persecuted minority at times, but they were also, they weren't always persecuted. They lived in a powerful empire that offered pressure to conform as well. So it's an encouragement to hope to the church that's feeling persecution and oppression. But it's also a challenge to the church that is enjoying good times and is living in a good society to maybe check your conformity. How are you conforming to the empire around you? So, next week we're going to cover Revelation from basically verse 4 to chapter 20. So bring a lunch. No, I'm just kidding. It'll be a high view. We'll blow through it. But what I want to do next week is we're going to look at themes from the book of Revelation. We're going to look at, the beasts and the Antichrist and the horse and the riders and the just all some of those. And what is John trying to tell us? What's the point behind all of this? What are the major themes? So we'll do some work there. We'll look at how did the church receive Revelation? What was the message? How did the first generation of believers in the 7 churches that are listed in the next 2 chapters, when they read it, they're living in the midst of the Roman Empire. What did it mean to them then? And what does it mean to us today to be believers scattered across an American empire? What does it mean for us today to live and heed and be blessed and to keep the prophecies and what was revealed in Revelation? The following week, 2 weeks, we're going to spend on the last 2 chapters, chapters 21 and 22. How do things end? Or do they? What does it really say? We think about apocalypse as the end, as an ending. Again, it's more of a revealing, but there is an end, or at least a transition, and we'll spend a week looking at that. And in light of that, it's more than just information, because it will tell us how we live in the meantime. But for today, 2 things I want you to take away with. Well, 3. Revelation singular, all right? 1, God is working. Now, that's probably not the most amazing thing you've heard, but because we hear it every week. But Revelation is not just about things that will take place, but it's about how God is working now. He is on a mission, and we as his church can be a part of that. We'll really flesh that out next week. I mean, this is just a declarative statement here. Next week, we're going to flesh that out on just what does Revelation say is going on? How is God working? How can we be a part of that? And the second one is that Revelation is much more than a prophecy about what will happen. But since God is on mission, Revelation is a blessing of hope and challenge. A blessing of hope and a challenge to non-conformity in the present. And so we'll spend more time on that in the next couple of weeks, just looking at in our specific case, how are we in this day, in this age, in this place, in this country, how do we need hope? How are we tending to conform to the age and the empire around us? So that's where we're going in the next couple of weeks. So, the theme a lot of this summer has been the mission of God, and we've been talking about the ping pong balls and the bless. And this is where the bless meets, where the ping pong balls meet the Bible in the sense of the book of Revelation, is that it's more than just specific prophetic events in the future, but a revealing of what God is doing. And the great thing about it is, because it's so symbolic, the symbols have specific reference points, like the elephant and the donkey and the rooster. But also the way that it's written is so universal that it applies to any believer, to any church, in any culture or time or age. Because in some respects, the temptations are always the same, towards lack of hope and conformity to the age. And so we'll really camp on those next week.